Hello everyone, Brady here from the Brady Brown channel. Welcome to another video. Thank you for joining me today. We are doing some kind of different video. It's not a series, but it is a video about the failure of Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. So recently I saw an article and I saw a video on this before. Basically it's talking about interviewing the CEO of Ubisoft. This was on PC Gamer. They interviewed the Ubisoft CEO, and apparently they recently had a sales report. It was the end of their quarter, and they had to report their sales figures and stuff like that. And at the start, he said Ghost Recon Breakpoint was a thundering failure, and to a lesser extent, Division 2 was as well. The revenues were expected pretty high for both the games, but ended up failing. But like he said, Division 2 still wasn't as bad as Breakpoint, but Breakpoint was pretty bad. So basically he stated as the main issues for it is there was an overall lack of interest in both of the sequels, and both of them also had excessive bugs, which led to the failure of the games. And it also didn't help that Breakpoint and Division 2 launched in the same year. They are similar games to a certain extent. The Ubisoft CEO stated that Breakpoint would naturally be compared to Wildlands, but it wasn't fair because Wildlands had more developing time and was able to get its act together compared to the sequel Breakpoint. He stated that sequels cannot be treated and handled in the same way in which non-sequels are, like Wildlands. He then went on to say they will continue to learn and adapt to these titles. It will get more difficult to create interest for sequels and have a successful multiplayer game when the past iteration has benefited from years of optimization and improvements. So what he's saying here is basically that the first games have time to be optimized, be improved, and add on to it, whilst a sequel, you can't do much with it because when, for example, Wildlands came out, it was a long gap between Wildlands and its predecessor. But when the Breakpoint came out, it was only an 18-month gap from Breakpoint and Wildlands. So you can't really improve stuff in that short of time for at least video games to be at least successful, semi-successful. Because if you change the core gameplay like they did, you will lose the fans from the previous game. But at the same time, it's probably harder to gather new players and pique new players' interest. And so he's saying basically that they need more time in between sequels so that they can get new players, but at the same time keep the old ones. And so that's what he's saying. He did acknowledge that it was fair and square in multiple ways too. They changed the basic elements of gameplay, but one issue for Ubisoft was generally having a success in evolving its variation of franchises. He then went on to say one issue in particular was generally having great success in evolving various franchises over the years, but some of the changes of the formula can be unsettling and require perfect implementation, and also offer an optimal experience. So, what he said was basically Ubisoft was trying to evolve that gameplay experience, trying to evolve the specs, the optimization, and the gameplay overall. But for at least Breakpoint, that didn't happen too well for them. They lost players from Wildlands, and they just didn't gain enough popularity to keep Breakpoint successful. Also, most of the time, or some of the time at least, it does become successful. For example, the gap between the Rainbow Six games from the previous game before Siege, New Vegas, to then Siege, it was a big optimization, improvements. That's why it was so successful. But from like Wildlands to Breakpoint, you can't have much of that. And that's why he said they generated a very negative reaction. And the average playtime was pretty good at more than 3 hours. But people from at least the previous game neglected it and, didn't play. And they're generally the most important. You want to gather people from the old one, and you want them to play the new one, because those are the die-hard fans. But if you can't get that, your game is going to be unsuccessful. So what ended up happening was Ubisoft said, alright, we have to delay some games. So the games they ended up delaying was Watch Dogs Legion, Rainbow Six Quarantine, and Gods and Monsters. They basically said that they'll arrive sometime in the second or third quarter of Ubisoft's next fiscal year, which, according to PC Gamer, it says July and December of 2020. So that means due to the failure of Breakpoint and Division 2, due to this 2019 failure for Ubisoft, and generally not just Ubisoft, everyone, a lot of studios had failure in 2019, Electron Arts, but we'll talk about that in some other video. But due to this failure in 2019 and the failures of Breakpoint and Division 2, they have to delay the next games, to around July and December 31st of 2020. I believe that Ubisoft can recover from this next year. They have some huge releases coming. Like I said, Watch Dogs Legion, Rainbow Six Quarantine, and Gods and Monsters. I know there's hype around it, especially around the new Watch Dog game. So I think Ubisoft will be able to recover next year, and they'll improve, because failure usually leads to success, because you learn from your mistakes and you take that from your previous games into your new games. And that's how I feel like the next few games for Ubisoft will be really good, and I hope they will. I genuinely like Ubisoft. That's one of my favorite game studios out there, because they are admitting to these mistakes. Unlike some other companies, which I won't mention in this video, but you probably know about, they don't admit to their failure. And I believe it's good to admit your failure, because not only is it good to fail and then improve on that failure, but it's also good to tell people that you failed. It's good to tell your community that you failed, because then, that gets them pumped for their next releases, because they know they'll be able to improve. And it genuinely will. It also helps them because people tell them what they failed about. What did we fail on to you guys? So they'll say, oh, you guys had too many bugs. You should have developed it for longer. So Ubisoft, in the end, will learn from their mistakes and be able to recover next year. But yeah, guys, I think that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. There was a lot of outtakes for me, because I literally edited probably a lot of this shit out. I messed up quite a bit on this video. It took a lot of notes, for me at least, and it took a lot of editing due to my Papega talking. But hope you enjoyed, and like if you liked the video, dislike if you didn't like the video, subscribe to know when a new video comes up, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take it easy.